it's had a huge effect.
Hello, everyone. I guess we'll be doing self-introductions today. My name is Chris Doyle. I'm the Executive Director for the Adventure Travel Trade Association, and I head up ATTA in Europe, and I'm also editor for Adventure Travel News. I'm joined by one of my colleagues here, Ulrika Larsen, also from the ATTA, working here in Europe. Today, the presentation Pioneering the Next 50 Years Today was originally planned for myself and Keith Bellows, National Geographic traveler, editor emeritus. And unfortunately, he had health concerns and so had to stay behind. And he's in recovery mode right now. But I have the good fortune to be joined by another one of our esteemed colleagues in the industry, Anna Pollack, who is the founder of Conscious Travel, and we'll be learning more about that here shortly. So first off, today, the Adventure Travel Trade Association, we're a global trade organization. We have over 1,000 members worldwide, and our mission is to responsibly grow adventure tourism. And I'll speak a little bit more about that momentarily. But just today, the UNWTO and the ATTA released for the very first time the Global Report on Adventure Tourism, which is the basis and the framework that supports what I'm going to be advocating and Anna will be advocating for today. This is not yet available in print broadly. It's available right now at the UNWTO site for download. It's a rather comprehensive report, and the entire concept is to help provide a deeper framework for all of tourism to understand what the harbinger of things to come will be for tourism globally. Okay? So I urge you to take a look at that, and that'll provide a lot of the details of things that I will speak in general terms about today. And just briefly on conscious travel. It is a movement, a community and learning program that enables places to attract and welcome guests in a manner that doesn't cost the earth. And Anna postulates that the operating model that has created a global tourism industry, one of the largest industries in the world, is dying and a new model is emerging. And the rules of the game are being reinvented right now, and that's what we will be speaking about today, both of us. Anna and I arrived where we are today through completely different paths, and so you'll hear a bit about Anna's story and a little bit about mine, at least the framework that we're coming from. And today, we're not putting on boxing gloves. We're not tearing anyone down. You know, that. Judging by what I've read in some of the media about what this particular session was going to be about, it was aimed at being this aggressive debate. And frankly, it is not a debate. It is the future. And so we're here to just talk about what some of those solutions will be. So for today, here's just a brief layout of what we'll do. I'll first share my thoughts about today's topic, and then I'll invite Anna to come up and do the same. We'll have a brief dialogue, and then we've got an intimate group here. And even if we raise some awareness and influence a handful of you, then we're doing the right thing. So I really appreciate you stepping up and being present here. And I hope you find something of value today as we speak. So as I mentioned about the ATTA, we are a global organization. And I'm going to read a mission that we've just recrafted, and I'll explain myself why we've recrafted our mission a bit as I describe this new vision for all of tourism, not just adventure travel. ATTA's mission is to inspire, connect, and empower a global travel community to deliver experiences that protect natural and cultural capital and create shared economic value. As the leading industry voice on adventure tourism, ATTA strives to make sustainability and safety a norm in the adventure industry. The report that I just referenced describes all sorts of categories of tourism that are very similar to adventure tourism. We all know all the cousins, ecotourism, nature-based tourism, community-based tourism, sustainable tourism. All of the definitions and the nuances are featured in here. I will not elaborate on them here, but just know that we're talking about the same framework. So some of you whom I know in the room, you have heard some of this definition that I'll be speaking about briefly, but I would like everybody to be operating from the same framework today, and that is a working definition of adventure tourism that was crafted in 2005 by the industry itself with the support of ATTA. So if you think of three circles, one being the adventure activities themselves, the kayaking, the climbing, rafting, trekking, cycling, and so on, and you pair that up with nature-based travel, the environment, engagement with nature, and then the third circle being cultural immersion. And if you combine all those pieces together, that is what we refer to often as the sweet spot of adventure tourism, okay? And in that, people say, well, is it hard adventure, is it soft adventure? And the lion's share of adventure tourism is in fact the softer side of things, okay? So that's where people are doing activity by day and have a very comfortable environment at night as a general rule. I'm making generalizations here, but that's the framework that I'll be taking from the adventure tourism standpoint. We know in adventure tourism that adventure travelers stay longer, spend more money, they're more progressive travelers, and they tend to go more frequently abroad to experience new people and places and environments. We also know that adventure travel requires less development, keeps revenue in the destination, and to be specific about that, and you'll find it in the report, our own studies, which are corroborated by other international studies, indicate that about 67 cents on every US dollar stays in destination through this form of tourism, versus mass tourism, which tends to leave only 17 cents on every dollar in destination. So this is also a framework for what we'll be talking about here. We also have seen and proven that adventure travel can help to reverse migration trends. And in fact, one of our board members is here, Alfredo Ferreros from Explorandes, who himself has developed adventure tourism throughout Peru, and in particular Lake Titicaca, where actually the youth have come back to engage in the adventure tourism sector. So they go to university, they go to the big cities, and then they've returned and helped create a vibrant economy there. That doesn't supplant existing economy, it just helps. So we've got examples right here in the room that do that. We also know that adventure tourism helps to transform travelers, and these individuals tend to become the advocates for all the things that we all care about: protecting people, place, wildlife, flora, fauna. So years ago, about 4 years ago, we did a study just to size up the adventure tourism market. And I think that was in 2009, we published a report. And we measured only departures, international departures from the Americas and Europe. And we did not include airfare or any of the gear purchased for adventure tourism. And we estimated the market size to be 89 billion US per year. In the 4 short years since, this market, this adventure tourism market, this exact same study has leapt from 89 billion to 263 billion per year. So it's rather rapid growth. And what we're seeing is leisure tourism in general is awakening to this form of tourism that inherently has many benefits on many fronts, whether it's economic, social, environmental. So today, part of the discussion is about the need to recognize that growth for growth's sake is not the answer. And I'm not sure if anyone read the blog I wrote last month for WTM, but it actually I talk about saying that the industry is broken. And so people immediately say, oh, it's going to be this tree huggers coming up there and saying, you know, it's broken, here are all the bad guys. That is not the purpose of today's talk, okay? The purpose is to acknowledge success of our industry. We're over 1 billion travelers now, but it's to encourage our entire industry. And again, for the rest of this talk, I'm talking about leisure tourism in general. I'm no longer just talking about adventure tourism. With success comes incredible responsibility, and it requires deep introspection. So whether you're running an airline, a destination, a cruise industry, what have you, now is the time to pause, because we are in an entirely new era of tourism, and change will occur in draconian ways in the years to come. And with all of us in the room and those whom we spread the word out to, we could actually be a force for incredible good that will lead to net gains on every front that we believe in: social, environmental, economic autonomy for people in rural regions throughout the world. So this is the framework for myself, for our organization, and I think all of us here. Self-examination is key. It's key to success. And to do that, we have to hit the pause button. And the fact that all of you have come to hit the pause button in the middle of an otherwise crazy event every single year is really key. And it's this type of commitment that will help us get where we need to go. So I stand here representing adventure travel. I'm here with you. Some of you represent leisure tourism in general. We're all responsible. We're all culpable for the situation we're in. And that is a mindset largely or dominated by statistics, heads in beds, trying to get sales, growth, everything. We have all these masters that we're trying to deal with, and we're focused on those day-to-day things that will keep us employed, that will help drive our company's sales and growth. We can send those profits to shareholders if that's the case for you. So we're a part of the problem too, adventure tourism. So I'm standing up here not pointing fingers at mass tourism, although there are challenges there. And it's not to alienate or chastise any particular segment, okay? So it's just to challenge a current industry that has significant room to grow and to do things differently, to change and for positive impact. So again, our industry is largely predicated on mass tourism, volume discounts, pricing issues that basically take all the value out of our industry, the deeper stuff that we care about, and devalues it. Is the market pressing it? Yeah. And we're trying to meet that market demand. But we have knowledge, all of us, that this is the law of diminishing returns. There is a zero-sum game here. We can have as much growth as we want, but in the discounting environment, in the situation we're in, we're going nowhere. We can grow incrementally. All the stuff I'm seeing has 2 and 3% growth. I guess you could do that for the next 50 years, but without the right mindset in how we grow, who we grow with, and how we try to influence our world moving forward, we're going to be in the same disastrous position we're in right now. So tourism can be a corrosive force, or, excuse me, as I will get to, we can actually have a very net gain orientation. And in fact, Anna Pollock will be spending a bit of time talking about that. So take that framework, the fact that we're based on a model that really is a zero-sum game, and layer in the other challenges that we have: carrying capacity issues, environmental fragility, climate change, and one that I fear even more just as a human, homogenization of everything that we're doing, or commoditization of things that otherwise should be incredibly special, these transformative experiences that we can have. So we can change this, and we can deliver a new approach. We can craft a new model, an evolutionary model, a solution. We can pursue a model that delivers net gains on most fronts, again, all the measures that we care about. And we can cope, adapt, and develop new strategies. We can innovate, and we shall do this. We're already doing it. We have living, proven examples in our industry right now that we should be rewarding, calling attention to, and honoring on many different levels. I'll speak to a couple briefly. So for us to do this, and what I called out in that particular blog, is we need a legion of pioneers. And to be a pioneer, of course, That means you've got to challenge and change the status quo. We've got to buck trends, traditional thinking. We have to break things, and then we have to fix them. Of course, the industry itself has already broken it, and so we have opportunity right now to set the new course. So what if we did together reconstruct, redefine how tourism, our measures for tourism, were measured? And really what's at the core of this, and what's been really painful for me, is the fact that our value system seems to be rather skewed. So what if our recognition and reward systems, in addition to the basic essential economic measures, obviously we all need to make a profit, and even at the ATTA, we actually say profit first, because if we aren't profitable, our organization won't exist and we will have no wherewithal to affect the future. So we recognize that. We're smart business people too, just like you. But our ulterior and ulterior motives are placed more in conservation, in the preservation and protection of wild places, protecting people, protecting culture, protecting languages, art, music, all those things that make up the character of a place. These are the measures that I think as an industry we can begin to spend more time and attention to, where we could put those measures out there, and when destinations and businesses take on that challenge and succeed, that they're rewarded for that, for the vision, for the execution, and for the continuity of these things. This is what matters. This is what will move our industry. This is what will really usher in a new era for what our industry can accomplish together. So my challenge, my open challenge to the industry, is to transform the way we measure our success. We'll do that by leading, by example, and as I said, reward and honor those people and organizations that are taking those progressive steps to more responsible travel solutions. I'll give you one example. A couple years ago, the Adventure Travel Trade Association delivered one of its Adventure Travel World Summit events. We do an annual summit, and the ATTA in its new iteration has been around since 2004. And every year since 2005, we've delivered a global gathering of adventure tourism industry professionals. And it comprised the basis of our membership, which includes predominantly tour operators, predominantly international tour operators, but also inbound suppliers. It included destinations, the DMCs, the agencies, the tourism ministries, airlines, marketing firms, media, PR, technology, all assemble annually. And they network, and we do professional development. We do quality enhancement, risk management programs, training, all sorts of those activities. So we gather them annually. And every year we have multiple destinations bidding to host this gathering. Now we have 700 plus delegates every single year, and we cap it at that to keep the environment comfortable enough. And every year we have multiple destinations, as I said, who try to get the event. And in that particular year, we had multiple destinations with equal opportunity or equal benefits. But we chose Namibia. And we chose Namibia in Africa because it is one of the leading examples globally for how tourism can be done right. So they gained their independence in 1991 and built into their constitution for their nation conservation management program. Today, they have about 47% of all of their land, and it's a very big country, under conservation management. 47%. They also introduced, over 20 years ago, a joint venture model, which is a shared model for adventure tourism product, for conservation management and such, where every stakeholder in the supply chain works together and shares in the profit. And now that country boasts it's the greatest wildlife recovery story really ever accomplished. And it's working, the people are engaged. In almost all cases, the poachers have become guides for conservation travel, for wildlife protection, for community visits and such. And they're all gaining financially. And it doesn't replace all of their arts and crafts, their farming, their animal husbandry, any of that. You know, they're still doing their activities, but it's a complementary activity. So here you have, you know, a developing nation that is doing it right and is a shining example. This model exists. We're not saying anything new here, but what we're trying to do is mobilize other people to begin thinking of the need to challenge their own systems. So whether you're a mass tourism industry representative representing a hotel chain or a cruise industry and such, we just want to work, collaborate together to bring more examples like this to places that we visit. So, of course, all of us must invest more time in researching and understanding these success stories. And we feel at the ATTA it's incumbent upon us to provide that awareness, the education and training to empower all the stakeholders in tourism. Secretary General Taleb Rifai has encouraged us this last couple of years through a quote that he gave at the Adventure Travel World Summit. And he's actually been a very strong advocate in recent years. He said, adventure tourism is what tourism should be today and definitely what tourism will be tomorrow. And in saying that, he basically gave us permission to be a bit more aggressive in how we communicate this, because he does view us as the beachhead for the future. It even says so in the report, which is very nice. He's got a great opener in this, and I encourage you to read it. So here's my challenge, and you may snigger in the room at this, is that we all must look more than 5, more than 10, more than 20 years down the road. If I had my way, I'd have everybody thinking 50 years down the road of what a utopic vision of the tourism industry might look like. Even my own team occasionally teases me for saying that, but the reality is, in fact, there's a great example. You may know that the Japanese in particular, they're deeply rooted in a philosophy that thinks in 50-year increments about the development of their nation, about the engineering, about technology. They're always looking 50 years out. So I went to one of their vision statements, and this is for their nation. And I'm drawing directly from the Japan Vision 2050. And this came out years ago, so even a longer than a 50-year vision. And they want to establish Japan as a nation of dignity. And there's all sorts of descriptions about what they mean by that, but that was their vision. And in that, they have this mapping model. It's a single page. It's really incredible. And there's a couple points that I pulled out of it. One of the things they said they have to do is nurture individuals to develop a historical view of civilization so that they will be able to think strategically. And I'll say that one more time because I'm going to push on that for all of us. Nurture individuals to develop a historical view of civilization so that they will be able to think strategically. The second point, especially for this industry, is get rid of the insular mindset and replace it with an open mindset. And these are two of the basic tenets of the Japanese philosophy on how they're going to accomplish becoming a nation of dignity. Where it says civilization, you can put in the tourism industry. The second part, moving from an insular to an open mindset, is absolutely key to how we move forward. And I grew up next to a Japanese family, and they first taught me about the 50-year vision when I think I was like 5 years old. And they were just really a compelling, soulful family. And I always believed in that. So it's possible. I usually set a vision on something I want to do. Power of intent. I say, I'm going to do that. I write it down. I explain it to people. And in almost every single case, if I've done that, it becomes real. And I don't mean that from a, self-healing standpoint. I just mean if there's something I want and it means a lot, I pursue it. And it's possible. And I think as an industry, if we step forward and we do the same, it's absolutely possible. So, to define a new course, one thing I'd like folks to recognize, and this is a Chris Doyleism, this doesn't necessarily represent the views of the ATTA, is I kind of view where we're at right now, the potential for being a second era of enlightenment. And I pulled out a particular quote from a historian, Ray Porter, on the thesis of liberation of the human mind. I won't go on with the whole piece there. But his quote, he says, for Kant, a great psychologist, a philosopher, enlightenment was mankind's final coming of age, the emancipation of the human consciousness from an immature state of ignorance. And so we are all progressing. We know sustainability is in our jargon. It's in the mindset of everybody right now. But this ignorance of or naivete is probably even a better word, of how do we accomplish that, not possessing the tools, the resources, the common frame of understanding. That's a big challenge. So we right now, as a collective, have a chance to usher in this new era of tourism enlightenment. And it's going to take a very strong force, but it starts with a few. Anna's going to speak to this in particular, and she's got an incredible metaphor that I think you'll wrap up today with that'll help us do that. So together, we're going to revisit our values, our ecological, cultural, and economic. Together, we can bring in the new era of tourism enlightenment. We can challenge the stale models. We can be progressive. We can take risks. So in my email, some of you whom I know have seen my email trailer, my quote, if no one ever took risks, Michelangelo would have painted on the Sistine floor. For me, that has great resonance because here, and I see by, we've got a small group here. People are very busy. But this is the type of topic that's in that gray area. If we challenge these billion-dollar institutions or governments itself, it's a risk. Even standing here saying some of what I am is I've heard feedback already. I've gotten some from the fact that I said the industry is broken, and I suspect that we will get more, and I will still say the industry is broken until we fix it. So troubled destinations, re-emerging destinations, overdeveloped destinations, they all face similar challenges, and they all have something to gain by pausing, reflecting, and today pioneering a new course for their future. So market-driven forces and global issues are each affecting these destinations, and destinations must transform and adapt to new world realities. And what we've heard, and I've done a bunch of canvassing over the last 6 months, I've lived and breathed it in some destinations which I won't mention, are in utter chaos. They're working at odds, they're driven by political gain, economic gain, and their bureaucratic framework is so painful that they're just not working together. And what happens is that then private enterprise backs off. There are models that are working, and I could give you a whole bunch of them, so if you have questions afterwards, I can point you to where it's actually working incredibly well. But destinations today need to prioritize how they approach tourism development. They need to commit to responsible tourism development, to protect their natural and cultural assets, to protect and empower their citizens, to fuel economic prosperity in a manner that prevents leakage. They need to engage private enterprise. To improve its GDP, they need to pursue the form of tourism that we're talking about here. Because that money will stay in their country. It will not go to foreign investors. It will go to the villagers, the accommodation owners, the local artisans, the craftspeople, the farmers. So why are many destinations still driven by short-term gain? That's more of a rhetorical question. I've been in situations where I've actually watched suitcases of cash come in to try to get favors on particular development projects. We'll never probably get away from that, but that's there and we have to deal with that. So the only thing that we can do is get the tourism industry and destinations truly to value how they measure their success, to move away from the numbers exclusively. Fewer numbers, but higher quality visitors can have significant impact on the future of those destinations. So these changes in mindset are already adopted and appreciated at the grassroots level, but don't have the government support, especially at the highest levels. And one of the aims of the ATTA is to get to every head of state that has adventure tourism potential and influence them. I've been invited to speak with the Prime Minister of a country here in Europe, and I'm waiting for the call because it could happen any day, but I'm on their program, so I have to wait. But we will be speaking to their entire cabinet, the Prime Minister and every industry cabinet, and it will be significant. And the reason I got that is because I met with the Vice Prime Minister, and he said, this is what will change our country. So this is the idea. President Calderon, former President Calderon of Mexico, also believed in what we're talking about here. And they made draconian changes and actually changed their tourism policy as a result of almost a decade of work by the ATTA and other partners. And now it is in how they develop tourism in their country, and it's making a significant difference. It's contributing to growth. It's protecting people and culture and place. So destinations must own their own actions. They must support global principles adopted by the UNWTO, the Global Code of Ethics. These are common sense rules. If you read them, it's like, how do we treat each other well? How do we treat people, places well? These are things that are just common sense for all of us. There are also examples of other industries that have gone under massive change. So in America, we have Walmart stores, which is the great evil, the biggest retailer in the United States, except for barring perhaps Amazon, e-commerce only. But even Walmart is awakening. You know, they're doing organic foods, fair trade product, all of that. Starbucks, you know, they have, you know, people either love or hate Starbucks, but they're doing fair trade. They've got all sorts of human rights principles behind what they do. So even those massive institutions can be incredible advocates for doing things right. We too can in the tourism industry. It is possible for us to reconsider our values. We can be a force for good. We can profit and we can lead. So let's come together. Let's be pioneers. Let's envision what our industry might look like for the next 50 years. Let's assemble the brainiacs in the industry, the people who really want to make change. Let's raise that awareness and guide others. And let's focus on the potential of net gain while doing right by people and nature. We must take risk today. So with that, I'd like to have Anna come and share her thoughts as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me. I felt quite privileged to be a stand-in for Keith Bellows. And I thought I'd start off by telling you why I call the work that I'm doing and the movement I'm trying to create conscious travel. And it really goes back to the experience of some American friends of mine who were invited by a guy called John Perkins. You may have, those of you who may have heard of the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He's a brilliant young man. Well, he was then, he's the same age as me now, but we're still young at heart. He spent a year prior to being recruited by the corporate world as a volunteer in the upper reaches of the Amazon and got to meet the Ashwa, a tribe of people who've been living sustainably in that forest for thousands of years. And they'd asked for help, or they needed help, because the oil companies were coming to search for oil and put various drills into the ground, which were creating leakage and toxins and all the rest of it. So he went to his friends, the Twists, and said, "Can you help?" And they did. They spent 10 years developing their capacity to map the land. They learned English, they taught them how to fly, they taught them international law, and for 15 years they were able to keep those drilling companies out of their territory. And at the end of that period, the Ashwa said, "Yes, it's great, we've won the battle, we've kept them out. Don't congratulate yourselves that you came and helped us. We do appreciate it, of course, but the reality is we're all in a much bigger problem together. And the only way you'll really make a difference is if you go back home and you go back north and you change the dream of the north." And that had a powerful impact on my friends. And it certainly has had a powerful impact on me, because what the Ashwa shaman understood was it's how we see ourselves in this world. It's how we dream it into existence that matters. And if we don't get to change that dream, then we're going to carry on with many of the problems that we're now experiencing. So to be conscious actually is almost to wake up from a dream. And many people would suggest that we're actually in a bit of a trance right now. We're certainly addicted to our way of life. We're addicted to growing every year. But we're in a dream simply, or in a trance, because we haven't really examined what were the values and beliefs and assumptions about how the world works. What are they? They may have served us well. Are they still serving us well? Are they even based on what we know about the world? And the irony is, in the past 50, 60 years, our knowledge of how the world works is fundamentally different to anything that we understood 50 or 60 years ago. Just our knowledge of how the universe was created and is expanding, our knowledge about quantum physics, our knowledge about cellular biology, our knowledge about how brains work, all of that has changed in the most fundamental way, and yet all our institutions that were formed at the end of the last century are in a way that we're still operating now. So conscious is about waking up, becoming awake, aware, and alert, and getting a pretty accurate, far more reliable understanding of the state we're in, how we got here, and how we can change. And part of that is recognizing that tinkering at the edges, making things green, isn't going to be enough. What we need is to shift that lens, that perspective. Albert Einstein did say, and everyone quotes this, but when you think what it means, it's pretty powerful. You cannot solve a problem with the same kind of thinking that created it in the first place. So we have to change our thinking. Now, the past 60 years have been absolutely amazing. I think we humans on this planet, the species called Homo sapiens, although sometimes it should be called Homo idioticus, but anyway, we've actually had an amazing party in effect. It's been my lifetime. I was born in 1949. So it was after the war. I know how my parents felt. You know, their parents had been in the First World War. They just had, a long time of conflict, of deprivation, of rationing. I mean, there was still rationing until I was 5 in this country. So people were really looking forward to this whole new peaceful world that we were going to create. We created the European Union as a result of that. And now a lot of people in my country want to tear it apart. But even good parties come to an end. And is that a bad thing? No, actually, it's a natural thing, because nothing in nature goes on forever. It evolves, it changes, it matures, it develops. And that's, I think, where we're at right now. Because the assumptions and values and beliefs that we had after the war, based on our knowledge of the world, are not working for us. But they did enable 50, 60 years of unparalleled creativity, unparalleled levels of progress. Yes, there are still 1.5 billion people suffering in poverty on the planet, and we need to fix that. But we've still lifted huge amounts of people out of poverty. We've created an understanding which enables us to send telescopes, almost to the other side of the galaxy. I mean, it's just amazing what we've done. We've also exploded our numbers. So when I was a kid, there were 2.5 billion people on the planet. Now there are 7. There were 250 million people traveling internationally, and now there are 1.2 billion. So tourism has grown faster than the population, obviously. So I would argue that a correction, therefore, is inevitable. It's also desirable because those early conditions have changed. We don't have an empty planet anymore, and we don't have endless quantities of cheap, available fuel. If we make some corrections right now, we might be able to safeguard the asset that we need in tourism, which is the ability to fly people, and at the moment we have to have that fuel in liquid form. So I look upon the last 60 years as an amazing stepping stone. It's part of our development as human beings that will enable us to make the next evolutionary leap. And if you think that sounds really grandiose, well, take pleasure in it, because this is why this time in history is so exciting. It's why I get up in the morning enthusiastically and not in a state of despair, because this is the very first time in history when humans have actually understood we are evolving as a species in our lifetime. Well, also the geologists have said that we're moving from one geological era to another in one lifetime. It used to be called the Holocene, and now they're proposing it be called the Anthropocene, because it's the first time in geological history that one species has determined the fate of most other life forms. Probably the bacteria and the microbes will do just fine. But the more complex animals that need a complex food chain are really at risk and depend on us making the wise choices. This morning I was at the presentation, we were listening about the fate of the rhinos and the elephants and the lions. And Stephen Stacker, talked about this problem of these animals and that they were facing an existential threat. But what we'd have in our mistaken perception of ourselves as separate from the rest of life, other species, we look at them as some animal to be saved, is that we're in a situation right now of existential threat. If we don't get this right, we're actually heading towards, well, we're not heading, we're actually in the middle of what's called the 6th mass extinction. Now, I'm not here to make you feel gloomy. I'm here to wake you up. That's the gravity of the situation. So just changing light bulbs and towels isn't going to do it. So why is it so important that we change this lens in the next 20 or 30 years? Finally, the scientists have got the language right. At least they're all 97.5% are in agreement that we have a problem and that we caused it. It's always good to know that we caused it, because if we caused it, there's a fleeting chance that we can uncause it or we can change it. It's when they say you've got a real problem and we don't know how we got into it and we don't know how we're going to get out, then you should be really depressed. The reality is we know how to get out of it, all right? But why 20 or 30 years? And we had this discussion yesterday. I said 50 years is too far away for most people to be able to handle. But 20 or 30 years, actually, it gets pretty realistic, because you can imagine yourself 20 years ago. Most people in this room probably are older than 20. So you can go back in time and realize it's just a speck of time. If you've got children, then you can imagine going forward, add 20 years onto their lives and imagine what they'll be doing. So 20, 30 years. But the reason that 20 and 30 years is the number is that finally they've found a way of explaining the problem in a language most of us can understand. Imagine the atmosphere as a great big sink. It's the sink in your bathroom. You can only put so much water in before it all overflows. Now, we now know how much carbon dioxide, which is invisible, unfortunately, we can put into that sink called the atmosphere. And there's space for 1 billion tons. It's a nice, easy number to remember, because it's about the same number of international tourists. So for every tourist, there's a ton of CO2. Just use that to help remember it. The problem is that we've already filled that sink up over the last few years already. If we continue to fill it up with CO2 the way that we're doing right now, then we have 20 to 30 years. 20 to 30 years before we've filled up the sink. And what that sink filling up means is we're past the point where we can stop the temperature increasing, because that invisible mass of CO2 doesn't go away, it just accumulates. And it performs its, the blanket that we know that it does to keep the air warm. Now, it takes a while for these ideas to sink in. In 1992 at Rio, all of these facts were made probably not quite as plain as that, but we did know those facts back in 1992. And the sad thing is that we as a society, particularly our governments and our businesses, and today there isn't much difference, they all seem to be doing the same thing, wanted to stall this. They didn't want to deal with it, because our entire economic system is totally based on it growing every year. We just don't know how to do a good economy without it growing, and this might mean that we would have to change from growing. And it would mean that some people would have to change their business. Maybe it wasn't going to work in this new world. But whatever it was, we had 22 years of denial, of resistance, of avoidance, or whatever. Now, you might think that, that's what it takes, is another 20 years before people are going to finally realize that they have to stop. Well, they can't just stop overnight. We have to stop now. It will take 20 or 30 years to put all of the institutions and the companies in place to live without spewing up CO2 into the atmosphere. But I believe very strongly that while that denial was going on, we had at the same time in the 70s the birth of the environmental movement. So there's awful lots of stuff going on like CO2 that's invisible, that is softening up the ground for a major shift. And business is now really starting to get it. It's very exciting because they understand one thing if you're a businessman. You understand, or a businesswoman, you understand risk. And now we can start to really quantify the risk. And the minute that bankers and insurance companies, as well as corporate executives, really get to grips with what the nature of the risk is, you're going to start to see things change. They say the hangman's noose focuses the mind. We've got this amazing society now of highly intelligent, highly connected, highly educated people. If we can just now find the will and the vision and the determination and the confidence to realize that we are the captains of our fate and we can change, then I believe we will do it. And tourism has the opportunity to play a critically important part in that. And every one of you that's taken the time to come to this session versus go and listen to how Airbnb are changing the tourism industry, which was quite a competitor to have this afternoon because everyone wants to know how they did it. We've now got to play our role. Now, in tourism, we tend to sort of say, oh, we just contribute 5% of this particular climate change problem. And that's a neat average. Doesn't mean anything, it's not very helpful. Because what's happening now is so many other sectors across the economy, IT, agriculture, manufacturing, car manufacturing, they've reduced their emissions by a phenomenal amount. So they're busy reducing theirs, we're busy increasing ours. So we might be 5% 5 years ago when that number was calculated. We're probably a larger proportion than that now. And if we go forward on the current trajectory we're at, which suggests we're going to increase our contribution to the problem by 130%, and didn't I just suggest that we actually had to stop producing it now? That's going to shine a very bright light on tourism. And I heard this expression from the first time from a tourism executive yesterday, and it was the president of the Association of British Travel Agents. And he said, we're worried. We may lose our license to operate. In other words, if we cannot, as a sector, show that we're doing everything we can to be part of the solution and not just a cause of the problem, society may turn around and say, we withdraw your license to operate. And what does that mean? Well, we may impose very heavy penalties or extra charges. I can almost guarantee that in the next few years, as this sense of risk starts to really penetrate through the business community and the political community, that we're going to see the introduction of carbon taxes universally, possibly even carbon budgets, I don't know. But that's a reality which makes nonsense of nearly all of the growth strategies on which every destination currently sits. I'd like you to name me a country, please, if you can find one, I'd love to hold them up, that does not have, we are going to grow tourism by X% over the next X years. If you can find a country that says, we are going to increase the net benefit from tourism that's coming into our community, that's enabling us to pay for the education of our children and leave sustainable whole livelihoods, if you can find a strategy that says we're going to do that without increasing the negative impact on both the planet and our community, then they should be celebrated. We should hold them up and actually probably all go and visit them and find out how they intend to do it, because I can't think of one at the moment. So, I say the first thing we need to do is wake up. The second thing I suggest is we need to grow up. Now, I've spent 45 of my 65 years working in tourism. And I've been fascinated because throughout that time, what I've watched is the leadership, whether it's at the local CVB level or at the UNWTO level or the WTTC level, they've had one constant theme of their messaging, which is basically attention seeking. Tourism is a really important industry, you should get behind it. Have you heard that one? I mean, just go and read the last press release even from WTTC. They're saying what they said 30 years. We've got to get recognized as an important economic contributor. Well, look guys, just back off. We know you're important. You can't, everybody travels. We can see that we need travel. You don't need to be saying that. You're acting like an adolescent that wants attention. I'm grown up now, but can I borrow the family car? Because what we're saying in tourism is I'm really grown up and I'm very important, but I don't want to have to pay for my externalities. I don't want any taxes. I don't want any more red tape. I don't want to have to impose standards in my industry. I just want to be recognized for how important I am. Well, that's not a behavior of an adult. It's the behavior of an adolescent. And I'm sorry if I'm upsetting some of you, but the reality is we've got to grow into adulthood. And the first difference between someone who's an adult and someone who's a child is the adult starts to think about the impact of their decisions, their choices on the other members of their family or their tribe. And in fact, if you look at indigenous societies, there is a rite of passage which involves that young person actually doing that. And so therefore, in tourism, what we should be asking right now, saying publicly, is yes, this is our impact. Yes, at the moment, carrying on the way we are, our impact will worsen. How can we help contribute to the solution of the problems that we face? Then I believe tourism will be taken seriously. So that means a really honest appraisal of what works and what doesn't work. And I'm sorry, I'm going to say it really boldly. You cannot take a sector that uses resources the way we use resources and grow it at 4% per annum, which means it will double in size in 12 years, and call that sustainable. It's just, excuse me, bollocks. All right, you're just in a state of denial when you say that. Now, I'm not saying there aren't parts of the world which cannot grow or should not grow, but our whole focus has got to be not on people moving, and all politicians, that's what they count. It's got to be on the net impact. We heard of some numbers today, and it's in the report. We aren't always being truthful. We're being economical with the truth when we say tourism is a wonderful thing. It will bring in foreign exchange. It will bring in jobs. It will bring in economic development. When we find out that in Africa, for every one of those safaris, 50% of the money goes out of the country. In Thailand, it's 70%. I wonder where it goes. Jamaica, it's 82%. Fiji, it's 80%, which means the country's getting 20%. But the country that's receiving all of those guests is 100% responsible for all of the additional infrastructure that's required to make sure that those guests can have a good time, be safe, and not leave a negative impact. When I found out today that in large chunks of Africa, the land is being poisoned because the resort operators, the safari operators even, are using sewage systems that were designed 30 years ago. Now that just doesn't make any sense to me, to say we are out trying to protect the lion, which is their livelihood, if they're fouling their drinking water. Okay, so we have to get radical. And radical isn't dangerous. Radical is simply getting to the root cause of the problem. I've got 5 minutes, is that okay? 2? All right. Address the fact that at the moment our industry is addicted to growth, but there are people right now looking at how we can run what's called steady state economies, and we should be really spending all our time trying to figure out how we could have a steady state tourism. Actually, if we have a steady state economy, we'll benefit enormously, because the one thing that makes it work in the macroeconomic models is for all of us to work less. Nice thought. Have more holidays, spend more time in the park. We've got to think about the whole issue of distribution. Again, the fact that those numbers I talk about in percentage, and you had a number in the report for the amount of money that stays in the economy, it was very small. That is a form of rampant colonialism. Do any of you think of yourself as a colonialist? Well, the reality is that's what's been happening. The rich North have been sucking out the benefit from tourism, but haven't been honest about it. That's why Namibia is a great story. The most important thing, and I'll stop here because I think I've made a few provocative points. Enough? Is I think the other thing that's really important is that we've got to empower people in the destination. Give them back the power to make choices about their future. Because the way tourism works at the moment, they are in most cases more victims of tourism than benefactors. Because the developers come in with the money, with the cash, with the investment that the politicians need so that they can cut tape and get voted in again. The developers come, they develop, and then they move on. All of the hotels that we have around the world, the big chain hotels, virtually none of them are owned by the brand. They're owned by developers and speculators. And the biggest thing we need to do in the hotel sector right now is to make some capital improvements to those buildings so that they don't leak all that CO2 or to put solar power on the roofs. But the decision about the capital expenditure is not made by the brand. It's not even made by the local manager because they get rotated through the place every few years, so they have no sense of place and responsibility. So all we're doing in conscious travel right now is we're asking some of those difficult questions, and that's one of the real advantages of being a white, middle-class, middle-aged lady who doesn't know anything to anyone. I can just say these things. I can ask the questions, but I would like to end by asking you to join with me in asking those questions. There was a famous poet who once said, "Learn to live in the questions, and then the answers will live through you." So now is the time to echo my wonderful colleague and partner in provocation. And that is we need now time to really reflect and take time out to ask the difficult questions. I'd like to leave you, I was going to leave you with a metaphor, but I'll save that for a blog, because I'd love you all to come and visit me on conscious.travel. And this is, I'd just like you to do this, though. I'd like you, in your mind right now, to fast forward 30 years. And there was a news item on the news, whether you watch Fox. I don't think Fox will exist in 30 years' time, so that's all right. The BBC will probably still be there. Fast forward, you're watching a BBC international news. There was a big celebration in Oslo this evening of the meeting of the United Nations to celebrate the fact that we had achieved the target, and this year we had managed to completely wean ourselves off the production of CO2. Right? We were now going forward independent of that. And you're sitting at the table, watching, sitting around with your grandchildren. And one of the more antsy ones, he's probably about 13 or 14, and he doesn't speak much, he just grunts. But he might just look to you in admiration and you say, "Hey, Grandpa, Grandma, that's amazing. We did it." Now we don't have to have that threat hanging over us all the time. It must have been really hard. It must have taken a lot of guts. You must have taken a lot of risks. How did you do it? What part did you play in it? Did you must have gone to these things. You must have gone back and got all your friends and colleagues committed to this path. Now, are you going to be able to look back and smile with pride and say, "Yeah, it was hard, but we did this, and then we did that, when we did that." And it was exciting because we realized that we were actually masters of our own fate and we could do this. And yeah, we went marching, but we realized we couldn't march all the time. We actually had to go back and put solar panels up, all that kind of stuff. The point is, are you going to be able to look back at those children with that degree of enthusiasm and pride? Or are you going to hang your head and suggest we watch another episode of The Simpsons? So I just leave that with you. Thanks very much for your time. Hope we haven't gone too long.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. So we've run our time, so my sincere apologies. I went a little bit longer than anticipated. Tomorrow, however, the ATTA is hosting a program. One part of it, the first part, includes an adventure tourism trends piece, which will comprise the first 45 minutes or so. And then we're going to carry on this discussion in a forum setting, so more of a dialogue tomorrow. So if you remain interested in the topic and want to help us start getting the thinkers together and start working on some of these solutions that we're talking about, we invite you to do so. And then the third piece is more of a networking for the adventure tourism industry. At adventuretravel.biz, there's a registration process, but in truth, you don't have to register to come. We invite you. It's between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. tomorrow. We should have a healthy group. We've already got 60 or 70 folks registered for that event. It'll be held in the South Gallery, rooms 19 and 20 tomorrow between 10 and 1. So we'll break it up. It's informal, but we will be delivering some new data and research for the global tourism industry. We've got a couple special reports that we released at the Adventure Travel World Summit 3 weeks ago, and we'll be bringing that here as well. So thank you for your time, commitment, and hopefully you gain something out of this that you can carry forward and share with others. Thank you.